I'm Yulia, and hopefully you're excited to see me again. This is the News Brief. Here we catch up with 4 to 6 news stories every other day based on what I consider to be the most relevant today. Then we discuss it in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. Also, as always, please don't forget to leave your questions, suggestions, constructive criticism in the comments under this video, because I read all of it. Let's get it. Today is a huge day for both Ukraine and the United States. I don't think I need to tell anyone really what today is. It's September 11th. And September 11th, 2001 marks one of the largest terrorist attacks that the United States has seen in modern times. A very big day, and today we commemorate all of the victims of these terrorist attacks on the Pentagon and the Twin Towers in New York City. I myself have lived in New York City for 13 years, and this day, for me, today, it's the first time in these 13 years that I am not in New York City for this date. And I can tell you it really feels, because New York really goes into mourning every September 11th. And waking up today, I really did not feel the same mourning, obviously. And on the one hand, it might seem like that's better, but also on the other hand, it feels very off, because today is truly a tragic day. For Ukraine, this day is also both tragic and inspiring, and something to look forward to the future for. Today is Crimea's international platform, where a lot of world leaders gather in Kyiv in order to discuss the next steps, the liberation of Crimea and the reintegration of Crimea. A very important memorial was opened in Kyiv today, in honor of this platform and in honor of the very people that suffered from terror as well, Russia's terror. For the first time, Catherine II and Russia annexed Crimea in 1783. It was when the indigenous peoples of the peninsula and Crimean Tatars suffered quite a lot from Russian repressions and Russification. The next time that Crimean Tatars have suffered from the Russian regime was in 1944, with Stalin's deportations, where upwards of 200,000 Crimean Tatars were completely exterminated. And the next time, that lasts till today, and unfortunately will continue lasting, was in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea again. So today, a memorial to all of the indigenous peoples of Crimea, and especially Kremlin, was opened in Kyiv, and I hope that it will continuously keep reminding people why Ukraine fights for this peninsula so much, and why it's not just land, it's people, and it's their well-being, and it's their lives. While all of this is going on in the world, we, however, keep living in a very, very, very bad Simpsons episode. Russia's National Settlement Depository, NSD, has lost a court case challenging the European Union's sanctions imposed due to its alleged role in financing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, according to Bloomberg. The fact that Russia can have a court case like that is obscene, and that's what makes it a very bad Simpsons episode. But that's not the worst of it today. We'll get there. But for now, the institution was sanctioned by the EU in 2022, with the bloc alleging that, as the main custodian of Russian securities, it enabled the Russian government to mobilize resources for the war effort. The NSD failed to demonstrate that the EU made an error in concluding that this entity was a systematically important financial institution significantly involved in Russia's financial system. The EU judges ruled. Well, thank God, because honestly, in the world we live today, they could have won the case. Nevertheless, the decision may still be appealed to the European Court, the highest court in the EU. But of course, there is a catch. Currently, the depository has approximately 70 billion euros, or $77.3 billion, tied up in the Belgian clearinghouse Euroclear, according to sources familiar with the situation. While these assets are not presently being utilized to generate windfall profits listed as financial aid to Ukraine, the court's ruling could potentially lead to their use and additional revenue in the future, similar to the actions taken by the EU with the assets of the Russian Central Bank, added the agency's interlocutor. I really hope that does happen. Another positive bit of news before we move on to The usual is this. Russia's state-owned Gazprom could lose approximately $6.5 billion annually if it halts gas transit through Ukraine, according to a report by Bloomberg. The potential loss serves as a compelling incentive for Moscow to consider renewing its current gas transit agreement, which expires in December 2024. Vladimir Putin recently indicated that Russia might be open to extending the transit deal, signaling some willingness to continue gas flows through Ukraine. That's so funny that they're willing to continue gas flows through Ukraine. Did anyone ask Ukraine? Oh wait, they did, and Ukraine said no. At the same time, Ukraine is exploring alternative energy sources and has entered talks with Azerbaijan. However, according to Ukrainian Energy Minister Herman Halushenko, no concrete offers from Azerbaijani gas traders have been made yet. Despite these discussions, Halushenko emphasized that Ukraine does not plan to allow the continued transit of Russian gas to Europe beyond the end of 2024. And that's good because, as I've mentioned priorly, it will result in a loss of a significant monetary resource for Russia, and that means they will be able to buy less ballistic missiles from Iran and less missiles from North Korea and less chips and whatnot from China. But with that said, one of the main recipients of Russian gas and oil is Hungary and Slovakia, and they're very, very not happy with this situation. So they secured themselves a deal. I don't know how, but they did, because they love blackmailing the EU. Talk about having to reform some statutes. Hungary secures Russian oil supply through Ukraine, according to Bloomberg. Hungary has reached an agreement for the continued supply of Russian oil through Ukraine, despite Ukraine's previous ban on Lukoil using its territory as a transit route. Under the new agreement, MOL, the company that controls oil refineries in Hungary and Slovakia, will take over the supply of oil at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border starting from September 9th. Previously, the Russian side was responsible for the delivery of oil to the borders of Hungary and Slovakia with Ukraine. This development marks a significant shift in the logistics of Russian oil supply to the region amidst the ongoing geopolitical tensions. See, the fact that we're still willing to find compromises for Hungary that are convenient for them makes us into a way bigger person or a way bigger country, because Hungary turns around on us and does things like this, which is super not surprising, given that they're literally Russia's little lackey, but still quite disappointing. Hungary plans to redirect its allocation from the European Peace Fund towards Chad's defense, rather than supporting Ukraine's military efforts. At this point, I feel like Hungary would rather redirect this money anywhere other than Ukraine, because that just doesn't fit their little narrative of friendship with Putin, does it? Hungarian Foreign Minister Petr Szijjártó announced that the government has proposed allocating 14 million euros from the EPF to help develop Chad's defense capabilities. This proposal will be discussed by EU countries at the Council on September 26th, and Hungary is hopeful for approval. Yeah, while there is a huge war of defense in the heart of Europe, and then the war of offense coming from Russia, let's redirect money to Chad's defense, because that is priorities, you guys. In addition, Hungary intends to strengthen its diplomatic presence in Chad by upgrading its representation in N'Djamena to an embassy. During a visit by a Chadian delegation led by President Mahamat Deby, several agreements were signed between the two nations, covering cooperation in areas like defense, combating illegal immigration, and agriculture. This move aims to enhance Hungary's strategic partnership with Chad and improve economic, educational, and military collaborations. Does Russia have any connection to Chad? Just wondering. Any gold mines? Any oil mines? Any tobacco mines? Anything? Because I bet that if you dig deep, you will see a connection to Russia. According to a Bloomberg report, Ukraine faces not only a need for more weapons, but also for permission to use them effectively. The article criticizes the U.S. approach, arguing that by supplying weapons to Ukraine while restricting their use, particularly in striking targets within Russian territory, the Biden administration is effectively limiting Kyiv's ability to defend itself and bring the war to a quicker end. The report suggests that if President Biden truly wants to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia, he should allow the Ukrainian military to use American weapons weapons more freely. While the U.S. government has pledged unwavering support for Ukraine, the article points out that in practice, Washington has exercised significant caution, which may inadvertently benefit Russia and prolong the conflict. And that is something that we discussed at length today with Linas Linkevičius of Lithuania in Burning Questions. And again, I'm not advertising a segment. It just so happens that most of the segments that I do on this channel kind of complement each other. Not kind of, but very much so, because in certain ones we can go a lot more in depth in certain subjects, because the brief is just that. It's brief. We talk a lot about the limitations imposed by the Western world and Western Europe and North America on Ukraine and how much they disregard the concerns and expertise provided to them in combating Russia by Eastern European countries. So do make sure to watch that if you're interested in this subject and if you're just as enraged as I am in the Biden politics of not escalating, or rather, my favorite person's, Jake Sullivan's politics of non-escalation with Russia, by literally making the Western world seem like the biggest wusses there are. Yeah, I said wusses. Deal with it. Oh, look at that. Some positive news. The US President Biden and British Prime Minister Starmer plan to discuss lifting restrictions on the use of long-range weapons for Ukraine this Friday, said US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, as quoted by CGTN Europe. Funny, how many times have they discussed it now? And we're gonna go back to the word discussion in a minute. The International Atomic Agency has confirmed that the reactors at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, currently occupied by Russian forces for over 2.5 years, it's nuclear terrorism, by the way, will not be restarted while the war continues, according to the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi during his recent visit to the ZNPP. Grossi emphasized that all 6 reactor units remain in cold shutdown mode and no restart will occur as long as nuclear safety is not compromised by the ongoing war. Funny. So funny. You know, I know that I get very, very petty in some of these segments, but hey, can you blame me? One of the people that I really do not take seriously anymore is Rafael Grossi, because while he says that everything is rainbows and butterflies at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants because Russians promised him that they wouldn't do anything wrong, because we can surely rely on these promises, he seemed to react a lot more harshly and seemed to be a lot more concerned when Ukrainians reached Kursk Oblast, nowhere near the Kursk nuclear power plant. He seemed to be outraged and incredibly concerned by Ukrainians being in the area. You know, the very people that have not so far blurred any lines of war and war laws and international laws. But, you know, Russians being in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant for the past 2.5 years has caused him less of a reaction. You know, the people that have, in fact, breached all of the laws and regulations of warfare and international order? Yeah. I mean, I don't seem to be very trusting of his conclusions. Can you blame me? And while Western leaders daydream about whether to show force and show Russia that they're not a bunch of wusses, the axis of evil, which is, you know, Iran, North Korea, Russia, China, just a few dictatorships, they turn the worst Western dreams into reality without hesitation. We warned Tehran publicly, and we warned Tehran privately. However, Russia has already received a batch of ballistic missiles, said U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. According to Blinken, Russia will likely use these missiles within several weeks. Meanwhile, the U.S. is preparing to announce new sanctions against Iran later on Tuesday, including sanctions targeting the national air carrier Iran Air, writes the Washington Post. Yeah, because sanctions are just as effective as allowing strikes, right? So here's something for your perspective, right? Let's say, instead of just introducing sanctions, Antony Blinken announced that the U.S. is letting Ukraine strike Russia with long-range ATACMS missiles, for instance. Then we could take down the airfields from which these missiles are being shot at Ukraine. Therefore, these missiles will be rendered useless. Right? Because the aircraft that carries them is going to be destroyed, the missiles are going to be destroyed, Russia's not going to be able to strike Ukraine, but instead we put on sanctions that are not even going to affect Iran for a while, and we are still going to have a rain of missiles coming down on us in the next several weeks, as predicted by Blinken. Yay! So much fun. And here are the sanctions that the US has just announced against Iran. The new U.S. sanctions target 10 individuals and 6 entities from Iran and Russia, as well as 4 vessels used by Tehran to supply weapons, including drones, to Russia. Iran has chosen to deepen its involvement in Russia's illegal war, and the United States, along with our partners, will continue to support Ukraine, commented U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo. What the U.S. has not done, again, is given Ukraine permission to strike Russia, while Iran is literally sending missiles and making decisions and not thinking and not strongly condemning whatever it might be. The U.S. is strongly condemning Iran's actions instead of actually taking action. Sorry, I'm feeling a little petty today. A little more petty than normal, I would say. Here are some more countries that are considering taking some action. Romania is considering a legal amendment to allow the military to shoot down unauthorized drones entering its airspace, according to Romanian media reports. This development comes after 2 Russian Shahed drones trespassed into Romanian airspace on the night of Sunday, September 8th. Nicolae Ciucă, the head of the Romanian Senate, proposed creating a protocol with Ukraine to facilitate the destruction of Russian drones by Romanian air defense systems if they enter the country's airspace. I mean, those have previously entered Poland, now they entered Latvia, before that they fell in Romania many times, and now we are considering taking them down. I mean, color me unamused and color me pessimistic, because so far we have been considering things for the past 2.5 years, and you know, it's been exactly 2.5 years and we're still considering, because every time that a drone or a missile debris falls onto a NATO country, you know, the conclusion is, well, Russia didn't mean to. It was an accident. They didn't mean bad. It's just escalation and, you know, what other terms could we use? Provocation, maybe? Yeah. My favorite words. Meanwhile, Ukraine is also considering, which, to be honest, I cannot stand the word considering anymore. Almost as much as I cannot stand the words strongly condemn and escalation. And it's crazy that Ukraine, provided the current situation, is just considering cutting diplomatic ties with Iran. I mean, guys, come on, can we just lead by example here? And the reason why Ukraine is considering it is due to Iran's supply of ballistic missiles to Russia, according to Foreign Ministry spokesman Georgy Tykhy. I can confirm that our warning still stands. Yesterday, the acting Iranian chargé d'affaires in Ukraine was summoned to the Foreign Ministry. We made Ukraine's position on the serious consequences clear. I won't specify what we mean by serious consequences to avoid weakening our diplomatic stance, but all options are being considered, he said at a briefing. Oi, I feel like we're learning from the West here, where we are considering and strongly condemning and issuing stern warnings instead of actually cutting diplomatic ties with Iran, which we should have done a long time ago from the first Iranian shipment of weapons to Russia. And maybe also from the first time that Iran has jailed, persecuted, or murdered their own people for standing up to their Islamic regime. Yeah, that would have been a very good time to do so. But I mean, hey, not criticizing Ukraine here, criticizing the West response, because there is only so much we can do in this political chessboard. As if our allies' indecisiveness wasn't a blow enough, the Wall Street Journal decided to encourage Ukraine to give in and share its Western expertise on what we should do with this war. I want to scream. Is there smoke coming out of my ears? Because there should be. And if there isn't, I am willing to put some special effects to demonstrate what that would look like, because, oh my God, Western journalists tend to live in a parallel universe and in a parallel reality where succumbing to Russia somehow brings them and, I don't know, Ukraine some sort of benefit when it doesn't. But anyways, we're gonna get there. First, let's ease in with some reasonable things. Britain says the longer Ukraine holds its position in Kursk, the weaker Putin's position becomes. Gilly stated that the Ukrainian defense forces need to strengthen their front line in the east and aim to hold territory near Kursk. The Ukrainians need to reinforce their eastern front line and hold the territory near Kursk. The longer they maintain control of Kursk, the weaker Putin becomes. The longer they hold Kursk, the better Ukraine's defense will be, he said. And I mean, that's a very logical conclusion, obviously, and I do agree with it, and there is really not much I can comment on it. But in contrast to this very reasonable, very demure, very mindful, very polite statement, there is this article from the Wall Street Journal. And if you couldn't tell in my previous statement, I am enraged. Ukraine faces the need for Plan B in the war with Russia, the Wall Street Journal states. And that sounds reasonable, right? Hold on a second. Ukraine is being forced to consider a Plan B in its war with Russia and strategize for next year, according to the Wall Street Journal. American and European officials, unnamed, told reporters that the West continues to support President Volodymyr Zelensky, who insists on driving Russia out of Ukraine. However, public support for Kyiv's allies is fading, and Russian forces are advancing in some areas. European insiders suggest that Ukraine should set more realistic war goals. This would help Western leaders justify continued military aid and supplies to Ukraine to their voters. Oh yes, because Ukraine defending itself and not letting Putin win and not letting autocracies and fascist regimes prevail in the world over democracy is not justification enough, right? Ukraine should set some more realistic war goals. Give Crimea to Russia, give Donbass to Russia, set some more realistic war goals. Your people are dying every other day. Set some more realistic war goals. There are drones raining on Kyiv every night, and you have to wake up from explosions that are just air defense and figure out whether it's an explosion near you or just air defense working. Set some more realistic war goals. I mean, public support is fading. Also, where is that statistic coming from? Because every statistic I've seen is not like that. In fact, the public still very much supports Ukraine. Let's transform ourselves into 1941. Hey, Jewish people, set some realistic goals. You're never going to come out of gas chambers. That's fine, Set some more realistic goals. Maybe you can, maybe not die in the gas chambers, but be slaves in them for the rest of your lives. Maybe you can even earn $1 or $2 while you're at it. Set some more realistic war goals. Because the Nazi regime is just going to keep going, and we can't justify supporting you. I'm sorry, am I living in the Matrix? Because if it seems to you like I'm incredibly on edge and enraged today, it's because I am. Because the publications like the Wall Street Journal and like the New York Times and others continuously keep writing these, and I am so sorry for calling them that, garbage pieces of journalism that are minimizing the problem that Russia poses to the world and that are discounting Ukraine's fight for freedom from Russia as, well, your goals are just not realistic. I mean, hey, defeating Russia, returning your territories, and stopping the murder of your people, these are just not realistic goals. My God, get a grip. Please stop doing that. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and British Foreign Minister David Lammy are expected in Kyiv on Wednesday to meet with officials and discuss Ukraine's vision for victory, as well as the resources needed. These talks may focus on coordinating future actions. However, there are reported differences between Ukraine and the West. High-ranking European officials, again, uncredited, anonymous, not specified, say a total victory for Kyiv would require hundreds of billions of dollars in support, which is virtually impossible. Talks in Kyiv with London and Washington officials could strengthen Ukraine's military capacity. So let me point something out here. Every time they're saying things that are actually true, and the European officials that do say they want Ukrainian total victory, these are not anonymous, right? But every single time that they're saying something that you cannot verify, it's anonymous sources because you can't verify it. This is how deceiving journalism is done. Any single time you read an article and they say anonymous politicians, anonymous sources, anonymous something, these are sources that cannot be verified. I could literally write an article and say, hey, anonymous sources, hi, politicians in Russia told me they're going to give up tomorrow. These are such deceiving tactics, and they're so, so harmful. Not a single European or Western official has said that their support for Ukraine is fading. None of them have said publicly that Ukraine returning its territories and winning is impossible. No one has said that this is not the goal. So let's not speculate and let's not cite anonymous sources and write trash articles, please. The article suggests this may be a step towards the US and UK allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike targets in Russia, although no final decision has been made. First of all, here's the thing. Ukraine does not need a lot more money to defeat Russia. Ukraine needs permission to use the money already allocated, as in weapons, to strike the right targets, because you can have all the weapons and all the money in the world. If you can't use it properly, then what's the point? It's kind of like, I can buy the best car in the world, but if I take out the engine from it, then what is it good for? It's just a decoration that's pretty. The visit comes ahead of the UN General Assembly, where President Zelensky plans to meet with US President Joe Biden and potentially candidates Donald Trump and Kamala Harris to present a plan to win the war. Whether these meetings will occur is unclear, but Kyiv hopes for support for its initiatives. The West views the upcoming US elections as critically important, as they will shape future aid to Ukraine. However, many doubt that the current level of support can continue for many years. Zelensky's new peace proposal signals an adjustment in his stance, which until now has focused on regaining all Ukrainian territory before peace talks could begin. So here is the thing. Any single time there is important meetings, there is important elections, there is something important that could provide Ukraine with either a lot more aid or, in this case, permission to strike Russia, which is a lot more beneficial than more aid, to be honest. There are articles popping up in these very, very big, accredited, trusted world publications that are cheekily telling you that Ukraine is going to lose anyway, so Ukraine should just give in, Ukraine should adjust its expectations, Ukraine should do this, Ukraine should do that. How fascinating. What a timing. Definitely no Russian hand in it. And I know that throughout this entire episode I sound so petty and so aggravated, but that's because I feel like I'm living in a Groundhog Day. Every time there is something that can happen that will help Ukraine defeat Russia, all of these publications suddenly start writing very demure, polite propaganda. You know, the propaganda that's kind of so supportive of Ukraine that you can't really tell that it's supportive of Russia, but also it's so covert that you can't even tell it's propaganda. Before anyone announces anything, and before we actually hear clear words and clear instructions from these politicians that you were mentioning from these big, important countries, let's maybe not speculate, because that's what tabloids do. That's what Yellow Pages do. They engage in speculating whether a British influencer got back with her boxer boyfriend. Why are we doing the same for politics in world-renowned publications? Does maybe the Wall Street Journal wants to change its name to the Wall Street Yellow Page? The Wall Street Today? The Wall Street Weekly? Us Wall Street Weekly? Because the quality of reporting here seems to be downgrading. Anyways, I leave you with this information, and I highly, highly suggest that you do not listen to opinions like this, because they are damaging. Yes, support in such numbers might not be feasible for decades to come, but also look back at World War II. Wars are not won in 2 years or 3 years. Major wars last. Also because strategies are not developed properly, and one of the strategies that we're asking for is being able to destroy Russian airfields and Russian ammo depots from within before they can cause damage. And that is going to save money for the West in air defense and in, targeting Russian aircraft as it comes in. And that will also speed up Ukraine's ability to win. So let's maybe focus on that instead of focusing on pressuring Ukraine into giving in. So as I said, I leave you with this today, and next time we'll meet next week. In the meanwhile, please don't forget to like this video, comment on it, send it to friends, give me your questions, suggestions, constructive criticism, or, debates. I read all of them and I try to incorporate them into the subjects in the next episodes. Please don't forget to also follow the Gaze, because we here work tirelessly to bring you the best quality geopolitical news and explanations. See you next time.